44% of Canadian pre-retirees have less than $5,000 saved up for retirement. So we definitely have to save more, but how much do we really need to save? Recent polls have suggested that Canadians estimate they need $1.7 million to save for retirement. What the average Canadian thinks they need to save for retirement is not why we're here, and it's not the question we're answering. In any event, a certain lump sum is kind of the wrong frame to be looking at retirement, and we really want to be looking at annual retirement income as an amount that we can withdraw from savings each year to live on to either maintain or increase our lifestyle. A good rule of thumb for this annual retirement income is 80% of your pre-retirement income. Now, the reason why we're at 80% here and it's not the full 100% is because in retirement, oftentimes you're going to actually have less expenses than when you are in the workforce. I mean, first off, one big expense that you are no longer actually saving for retirement. So that amount of your paycheck you're putting aside towards savings, you're just using it now. And as well, you're probably spending less on commuting to and from work. You may have already paid off your mortgage, you have no ongoing payments, things of that nature. So it's a bit lower than 100%. So the 80% rule is kind of the jumping off point that we want to start from. But if you know that you want to travel more in retirement or travel less, then you can definitely adjust that up or down. And this leads us to the calculation of how much you actually need to save as a lump sum to have ready to go for retirement. Another common rule of thumb that financial planners will use on this is called the 4% rule, which is the 4% safe withdrawal rate. So when using the 4% withdrawal rate, you would want to use 4% of the initial value in the first year, and then just increase slightly each year just to account for inflation and cost of living increases. So somewhere around a 2% increase each year on that total amount. And this 4% withdrawal rule is a pretty widely used phenomenon. And it was actually developed in the 1990s by Bill Bengen, who was a financial advisor. And what he did is he looked at stock and bond prices, dips and drives over the period of 1926 to 1976. And he found that using the 4% withdrawal rate, there was not a 33-year period where you would run out of your funds by using this rule of thumb. So modern day financial advisors might recommend 4%, 3%, 5%. It all varies on the situation. But if we look at this table here, we can actually see that the 4% withdrawal rate has a near 95% confidence rate for 30 years, meaning if you follow this, have invested half in stocks, half in bonds, based on the historical numbers, you have a 95% certainty that you won't run out of funds. And it goes down as you get down into the 55 and 60 years. But you can also compare that to a 3% withdrawal rate, which is pretty much 100% certainty based on historical data across the board for up to 60 years. Of course, you don't know what the future holds, but based on historical data, there was no situation where a 3% withdrawal rate would have run out of funds. Compare that to 4.5%, a bit more aggressive, and you start to be at 83% certainty for just 30 years and dropping down thereafter. So with the 80% of your pre-retirement income and the 4% withdrawal rate, let's run through some examples for the actual lump sum that you're going to need to have in order to retire here in Canada. So just to get a median look, in 2021, Stats Canada reported the median income in Canada after tax to be $68,400. Now, we are talking about after-tax income here, so keep that in mind. But in order to run these numbers, we take $68,400 and times it by 80%, which is what we intend to withdraw each year using the 4% rule. So 68,400 times 0.8 comes out to 54,720. Now that's the after-tax dollars that we want to be pulling out of our retirement fund. So because this is after tax, it could just be straight tax-free if you're pulling from something like a tax-free savings account. Alternatively, if you have RRSP, there might be some tax component to that, but you're still getting those tax deferred benefits. So if you're heavily invested in a TFSA, you can lean more on your tax-free side. What we do with that number, the 54,000, is we times that by 25. And that gives us our actual whole nest egg that we're going to need to have invested in order to retire. So when we do that, we get $1,368,000, which is actually lower than the average Canadian thought they need to retire with, which is 1.7 million. So the median is actually showing us that Canadians might be able to retire sooner than they thought. However, I mean, of course, if you have a higher income, you're gonna need a higher savings rate. And the higher income you're going to have in retirement, you're definitely going to be looking at having some tax on that income. but that's all to calculate with down the road. And when planning for these numbers, for trying to figure out how much you need to save per year with compound growth and something like a TFSA or an RRSP, keep in mind that in the early years, there's kind of two factors. One, your income's probably never going to be as low as it is right now. So say you're 28, you're young, early in your career, your income's probably just going to increase, which means you might want to base your savings goals off of your anticipated income. As well, while you do have a smaller income right now, the dollars you invest when you're young are going to go miles further thanks to compound interest in your investment accounts than dollars put in 10, 15 years before retirement. So even though you're on a lower income now, anything you put in is just going to really increase that retirement fund. We also want to consider that 80% withdrawal rate is going to be for your intended lifestyle. So that's a good rule of thumb if you want to stay with kind of a very similar lifestyle as you had pre-retirement. But if you do want to be flying all over the place, playing golf every day, spending a fair amount of money in retirement, you're going to want to plan a bit on the higher side of that. On the flip side, if you have a cottage paid off somewhere and you really just want to go hang out at the cottage, not do anything, you can probably go a little bit lower on those expenditures. But all of this, with all of these examples, it's always great to critically think about your own situation, but it is always better to start planning now. The fact that 44% of Canadians have less than $5,000 in their retirement account is just wild. Now, in any event, thanks for watching. Catch you later.